Everything is already perfect and wrong, ruined and amazing. Hello friends, and welcome to my very first solo book review. This is very exciting. My name is Jason, or as you might know me, Easy Cat. If you've been here in the past, you know that for the past couple of years with my book reviews on YouTube, I've been doing them as monthly reading wrap-ups. And starting in 2025, I wanted to start doing singular book reviews so I could really dive deeper into these books. And I think a couple of things happened when I was doing these monthly reading wrap-ups, right? One was that I felt this pressure to read a lot of books so that I could make those reading wrap-ups really beefy, and if there was a month where I didn't read as much, I felt almost like self-conscious about doing a reading wrap-up because I felt like, well, what am I gonna? I'm just going to talk about these two books, and I don't think that's a good feeling to have, and I think it's ridiculous because, like, who actually cares if I read one book or five? Like, it's really all in my head. But also, a lot of times when I'm talking about the books in those wrap-ups, I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible because I know I'm talking about several books, and also some of those books I read, you know, a month ago at that point, and so I'm kind of just trying to formulate my thoughts, but I've already moved on to other books. So I thought by talking about these books as soon as I finish them and giving them a video of their own, I can really go more in depth. So that's what I'm hoping will happen today. This is going to be structured a little bit differently than my reviews in those monthly wrap-ups. So I'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, if you enjoy my videos, please feel free to like and subscribe and leave a comment. I'd love to see you back here sometime. So today we're going to be talking about my very first read of 2025, which was The Mourner's Bestiary by Erin Caffel. This is a nonfiction book, so something you may have seen that I've posted about a couple times now is that I'm splitting my reads this year into 5 different categories, and one of those categories is nonfiction. So this is the first of the nonfiction books for that category for the year, and it's also my first read of 2025, and I have to tell you, it was absolutely excellent. It was breathtaking. So first of all, let me give you kind of an overview, right? So The Mourner's Bestiary sort of explores Erin's, it's a memoir really about Erin's life. And Erin is living with PKD. I'm also, by the way, I'm trying to keep all my notes together so I can give you thoughtful thoughts. So I'm using a little book journal to keep my little thoughtful thoughts together. I'm going to not try to reference it too much as we talk, or if I do, it'll be off camera and you'll just see me going like this trying to look at it. But PKD stands for polycystic kidney disease. And essentially this is, what's happening is, for the people that have it, it's a genetic kidney disease, and the people who have it grow, as they get older, they grow these fluid-filled sacs on their kidneys, and in the past, it has been quite deadly. And as we learn through the story of this book, we see that, you know, the thing about medical diseases and disorders is that as time goes on, there are more and more, science is finding new and wonderful ways to help people and to extend their life and to make their lives better. And we're definitely exploring that to some degree in this book. But what's interesting is Erin is talking about how she, living with this disease that is essentially where water is filling up these cystic sacs on your kidney, and her whole family, everyone in her family has had this disease for the most part. She's had a couple of people in her family who have gotten lucky genetically and not gotten it. But because of that, she feels this connection to the water and to the ocean, and it also has to do with, you know, her family and places they've gone when she was younger. And so there's this connection throughout the book to water, and in a way, water is slowly, you know, killing her and killing her family, but also she feels deeply connected to the water and the ocean and ocean life and all of that. And the book is really dealing a lot with chronic illness, but it's also looking at chronic illness sort of as a microcosm to explain also like the collapse of ecosystems and talk about the preservation of ecosystems and things like that. So there's a lot of science talking about different sea creatures in the book as well, which is interesting. And so the book kind of vacillates back and forth between her talking about her experience with this disease and her family and the trauma and the grief that this disease has caused her family. But it's also discussing, you know, the disease of sort of, I don't want to say global warming, because that's really, it's more than that. It's the way that humanity is humans and people are treating these natural places in our world and the bad things that are happening to them and the way that they are being systematically erased or having these issues where, you know, these different bodies of water are getting to a place where life can no longer survive in them, but also the things that we can do to help them. And it's got a lot of complexity to that aspect, right? I think from the science side, you will walk away from this book having learned some things about the sea creatures that she talks about, but definitely her life and the memoir aspect of this book is the central focus. And it's the part of the book that I'm going to talk about the most, because it's the part of the book that I think is going to affect people the most. I think it's really cool to see this intertwining of science and memoir. But at the end of the day, the memoir part is definitely the part that stuck out to me the most, though I did appreciate the way that she includes the science and nature side of it, because also science just is incredibly important to her story as science advances to try and find a way to help people like her with her disease be able to live longer, more fulfilling lives. Speaking of this disease, because this disease is something that is genetic and is affecting her and her family on a generational level, the book is also really diving into generational trauma and family and grief and anger and healing and all of the feelings that get wrapped up. I mean, you take all the feelings that get wrapped up with having a family, right? And the way that we're raised and the things that we hold with us, right? Like that moment where your mom did something when you were younger and you just really never let it go, right? And she talks a lot about her family as a whole. And I think something interesting about the structure of this book is that the main kind of story of this book is following her taking her son Dex to the Monhegan Islands, and they are kind of, going there as a trip for them to explore. And while she's there, she ends up having a seizure and gets rushed to the hospital during a nor'easter. It's very dramatic. And that part of the story is sort of our grounding place. That kind of keeps us in the here and now. That happens in 2014, so kind of here and now. And then throughout the story, we kind of keep coming back to that moment. And I think we come back to that moment a lot because it is sort of a moment like pinpointed in the middle of the grander story that she is telling. From there, we're able to flash back and look at things that happened in her childhood, in her teen years, her relationship with this disease, especially how it pertains to her relationship with different family members, with her mom, with her dad. And also, at some point, we also are flashing forward to see like where she goes after this low point. And I think why this feels like a low point for her is she's with her son. She's in a place where she is all by herself. She doesn't have any friends or family near her with the exception of her young son. And this horrible thing happens to her. And in her mind, because she's watched so many of her family members die to this disease, she thinks this is it. This is the beginning of the end, right? Like this is the moment where from this day on, my life will never be the same. This is the moment that my body starts to fail me. And she's seen it happen firsthand. She's watched this disease take her father. She's watched it take other relatives that she was very close to. She knows the family sees it as a curse. Like it is following them, right? And so in this moment, she sort of hits this like really, really low point in her life. She's divorced from her husband. He is abusive and she has no one to turn to. So she's out in the middle of nowhere, just kind of like trusting in the kindness of strangers to get her to a doctor's office and to make sure that she survives this moment. And so it acts as a nice like baseline and a nice anchor to the rest of the story that is sort of happening all around her in this point. And so we are really taking a deep dive on her family, and we're taking a deep dive on her father, growing up and having this disease and her firsthand account of seeing his health fail him as time goes on. And her father and her mother separate. And it's interesting because she feels so much, she talks about this later in the book, that she feels so much anger towards her mother because her mother has a really hard time being a mom. She talks about how her most intimate moments with her mother are moments that feel more like they were friends or sisters rather than a mom and a daughter. Like at one point, her mom is like talking to her about her and her father's like intimate life and how they no longer have any intimacy because of his disease. And like her, Erin is listening to her mom just like, this is not the conversation that you should be having with me. And she feels very let down by her mother. Her mom often does not play the role of parent. It's often Erin who has to play the role of parent to her mother and also take care of her father. And I feel like a lot of people have been put in this situation, right? Where you have to parent your parents because your parents are not great at being parents. And it's hard because you want to care for your parents. And obviously it's this very nuanced, complicated thing because your parents do things for you, right? Like everybody's story is going to be different, but I really related to this aspect of the book of like, my mom raised me and took care of me, and she was a single mom, and she was getting help from my grandma, and she kept me fed. She kept she kept a roof over our heads. My mom did things to keep both of us alive, and she is the reason I am here today. But at the same time, there are aspects of me growing up, and there are moments of me, in my childhood years and in my teen years, and even as an adult, where I just feel so much anger towards my mother and my grandmother as well. And I think especially in recent years, because our politics and the way we see the world is so vastly different, and it's caused me to really have a lot of anger and a lot of I feel let down by my family. I feel like you guys raised me to be so thoughtful and caring of the world. Why are you not the same way? And I think Erin struggles with that, right? She struggles with the fact that her mom does do all of these really incredible things that she does look up to. Her mom is dealing with depression, and she kind of digs herself out of that and goes to school and finds a place for herself and makes a place for herself in the world, despite all of these things, all this entire system in this world that feels rigged against her, and she's dealing with it all while she's in depression. And Erin looks at her mother and says, that's really impressive, and that's really beautiful, and it's really amazing that she did that. But also, sometimes I just need her to be a mom to me, and her mom often fails in that regard. And I just find that aspect of the whole story so interesting. And I really related to that a lot. I in the chapters that dealt with her and her mother and their constant struggle of a relationship. I can't talk. Their constant struggle of a relationship. I was crying. I was a mess. I really felt, I don't know. I really felt seen in that moment. I really connected to that moment and to her as a person, because I get it. It is hard you have parents that you look up to and you respect, and you think, wow, you did all of these things, and I just have so much. You live in awe of these people. But then also at the same time, she's in this moment. She's like living in awe of her mother and like thinking about how far her mother has come and how much her mother has done to get to where her mom is at this point. And she's thinking all this. And then at one point she asks her mom, she's like, hey mom, I really need your help. I'm sick, and I need can you possibly like take care of my son for a little bit? Like take him to the beach. Like he needs to get out of the house. And her mom is just like, no, that's too much for me. She's having this moment of revelation where she looks at her mom and it's just like, wow, she really fought to get where she is. I have so much respect for her. I don't give her enough grace. She really is a special person. And then she asks her for this one simple favor, and her mom's like, no, honey, I'm tired. I can't. And you just feel it all come crumbling down. I don't know. It really affected me in a big way because I've been there and I feel that, and I totally understood it. So I did bookmark a couple of quotes that I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. This one specifically talks about that family aspect, and I think it really captures the way that family is discussed in this book in a really concise but meaningful way. Sometimes it is harder to love the world that is both broken and whole. Sometimes it is harder to love the people who are both strong and weak. Sometimes it is harder to stay present to the truth that nothing is going to return to full wholeness after loss, but that you might still find a way forward. That really captures all of that for me, like this complexity of like loving people who are, I don't know if unlovable is the right word, but loving people who are complex and are not just all good or all bad. They're just people. They're broken and just doing their best. And sometimes their best isn't enough for what you want from them. It's really hard. It's very challenging, right? And I think within that family dynamic, we find not only, listen, in a completely healthy family, growing up and generation to generation, there's struggles and there's generational trauma and there's generational healing. And that is amplified in this book because of PKD and because of what this disease does to this family. This family is surrounded by grief constantly because they are constantly losing people, and they want to, Erin included, and her whole family, they want to live a full life, but this disease, this curse is always in the back of their head. They always have to consider it. Whenever Erin finds someone that she wants to have a relationship with, she has to make sure that they are willing to go on the journey with her of this disease and know that this is a big part of her life. And she gets into relationships with people that are like, yeah, I can handle it. But then when it starts to become an actual thing, they really can't. If you're not in it, if you don't have a family that is going through that, it is so incredibly hard to imagine. And I think in the moment, you can always be like, yeah, we can weather any storm, right? Through sickness and health. But then when sickness happens, sickness is so much worse and so much bigger than I think you ever imagine it to be. I think it's one of those, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so when sickness and disease and when these things take hold of a life and a family, I don't think you can truly understand it until you're living in it or unless you've lived it. And so it's easy when you haven't to be like, yeah, I can handle anything. And then you get to that point and you're in it and you're in the mess of it and you realize, I don't know if I can handle this. And in many regards to her relationships, you find that these people can't, and they end up fleeing because they're like, I can't do this. And that is heartbreaking. And it happens, you see that in several different cases of like family or people that she loves or people that other people love fleeing because it's just too much grief to bear. One of her family members, I believe it's her uncle, I might be wrong with that, but I believe it's her uncle, Brian, ends up not getting PKD, which is he somehow dodges this generational curse and then instead ends up getting HIV. And he gets it during a time where HIV is, it's not to the point where it is now. It was not manageable at the time. And so it's like he dodges one awful disease for another. And that's incredibly heartbreaking as well. And she compares PKD and HIV, of course, because they are both very powerful diseases that take life and for a long time did not have very good ways to cure or manage them. And this passage kind of discusses that disease aspect and how she kind of encapsulates all of these, diseases and cures and illness and all of that in her mind. I have been sick with a chronic illness for a long time. I feel only rage at any implication that the sick bring illness on themselves or think their way into cure. I am not looking to be cured. I can't be. I am looking to be healed. The former is about science. The latter is about belief. The former acknowledges a disease system that operates through biology. The latter allows for complexity in the quality of my suffering. The world is too random and the heart is too complex to assume that we have control over our bodies, and illness is not a judgment, nor is any disability. It is a chance, and genes and pollution. It is stress and poverty and capitalism and luck. It is not you. It is not me. I just think that's so powerful. I think the way that capitalism and the way that the systems of our world and the way that our healthcare system has us looking at illness and disability, it has us, especially, God, I think about this a lot with the HIV epidemic, and it has this almost like you brought this on yourself. You made choices that led to this happening to you. And that is not the case. Like, disease and illness is all about chance and luck and genetics and these moments in time that happen to us. And in most cases, most disease and chronic illness and disability, people are born with it. Like, they're not choosing these things, or something happens to them in their lifetime, and these things happen to them. And people with these illnesses and with these disabilities are just so looked down upon and so treated unfairly by society, which is crazy because it could just as easily be you or me or any of us. And so ultimately, the people who live with these diseases and these disabilities, whether it is you personally or someone in your family, you become survivors, right? Like you have to survive your grief. You have to survive the disability. You have to survive the illness. And you're looking for ways to live your life to the fullest without letting it completely devour you. And I think that is really hard. How do you live with a disease that you know has taken everyone in your family and will take you someday, and try to just enjoy like a hamburger and fries, right? Like, how do you live your life and enjoy starting a family and growing up and experiencing a beautiful sunset when in the back of your mind, you have this thing that you know is eating you alive? It's incredibly difficult. And I think this book, more than anything I've ever read, really captures that feeling. And I want to circle back here because a lot of this book is about Erin's body and the bodies of her family and the collapse that is happening inside of them because of PKD, but it is also about the environmental collapse that is happening all around us. Like, we are all experiencing this deterioration and this collapse of health because of everything that is happening around us, to our oceans, to our air, to our wildlife. All of that affects us. We are all part of that collapsing system together. It may be that we have entered a period where mourning is permanent for all of us, but mourning is not the same as grieving. They are distinct. Grief is the raw element of loss. It is singular, private, individual, internal. Mourning is the external experience of loss, the public face, the collective, the unfinished story we make together. Survivors, whether of genetic illness or settler colonialism or class warfare or systemic racism or ecosystem collapse, are not going to stop feeling loss ever. We are all permanent mourners. I have settled into this truth. I have found it to be the doorway to joy. That last part, that last sentence, so powerful, right? That's so powerful. This idea that people who are struggling are all mourning together, and the acceptance of that is what opens the door to joy. If you've watched any of my nonfiction reviews over the past couple of months, something that I've talked about in the most upsetting books that I've read, so Jesus and John Wayne and A People's History of the United States of America, is that despite being horrified by the things that were happening in those books, when I got to the end, I felt hope, because we are still here, we are still fighting, we are still moving forward. And that line, that idea that all of these people are mourning collectively, and by accepting that, we are moving forward and we can find joy and we can find hope. Oh my God, it's so incredibly powerful, and it really captures that feeling that I think I have coming off of 2024 and everything that happened this past year, and looking at what comes next and feeling the sense of hopelessness. And I feel like by accepting that hopelessness, and by accepting that despite all of my fears, all of the bad things that have happened in the last 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 years, that we are still moving forward, allows for joy and allows for hope. And that's super powerful. I do want to say that you've probably by now understood that this book is often incredibly sad and incredibly depressing, and I cried a lot while reading it. But the end point of this book is really hopeful and beautiful. There's a moment later on in the book where it gets closer to modern day, where Erin has this conversation with her mom, and Erin has it's really hard. Everything with her mom reminds me of my relationship with my mother and with my grandmother, so just excuse me if I tear up a little bit. She has this conversation with her mom. So at this point, her son has grown up a little bit. She's found this man that she's married that just cares so much for her, cares so much for her son, is like in it with her, is like in for the long, like not fleeing. He is here to stay. He's a great guy. And her mom, whose health is failing because of cancer, comes to her wedding. And when they drop her off at the airport, her mom is like, I am just so proud of you for this life you built. Like, you made it. You did it. You built something for yourself, and I'm so proud of you. And you found this wonderful guy, and you have this wonderful son. And her mom finally like acts like a mom and is proud of her and tells her that. And the scene is funny a little bit, because I'm weeping reading it, but at the same time, there's one of those guys that like controls the cars, like, please, ma'am, you got to move along. Like when you're trying to drop people off or pick people up at the airport, there's a guy that keeps coming on. It's like, you have to move your car, and they're having this like incredibly beautiful moment, and it's so real. It's so real. I spoke of this moment where she has this seizure and she is in a hospital and she feels completely like I have no one to call. I have no resources. I have no one. And she does end up calling her mom. And her mom, even though her mom is really not good at taking care of her or helping, or like she calls her mom to come help because the doctor says she's not allowed to drive because of the seizure. And she drove to get there. So she's like, how am I even going to get home? So she has her mom come, and her mom treats it like a vacation. And at one point she's like, oh, well, that's not very fun to do on a vacation. And her daughter's, Erin's like, well, you're not on a vacation. I had you come here because I'm sick. I had a seizure. I needed you here. And I think it's important to have that moment in time, her low point where she has to reach out to her mom, who she's having all these struggles with, where her son is too young, like he's just there. She's worried she's going to lose him because the doctors are going to see her with him and be like, this woman cannot take care of this child. This low point in her life, I think it's so important for that to be kind of the baseline of the story, the point we anchor back to a lot, because seeing her past and what leads to that point makes you understand why that moment is so heavy for her and why she feels like that is the end. Like, this is the beginning of my body failing me. It's important for that reason, but it's also important because then you get to see where her life goes after that, and you get to see that at your lowest point, there's always going to be a tomorrow. And seeing her kind of rise up from that and seeing the path that her life takes her, and she gets to experience these things that she didn't think she would ever get to. She didn't think she would live long enough to. She gets to perform music. She gets to write and publish her first book. She gets to see her son grow up. She gets to find this man who really truly cares for her and her son and get married to him and have her mom there and have her mom be proud of her. And all of it wraps up to something just incredibly, incredibly beautiful. And it's a stunning, stunning book. If you haven't caught on, I gave this 5 stars. I loved this so much. It was such a powerful way to start 2025 because it's so insightful and so thought-provoking, and it's filled with moments that I related to so much. And I feel like the things that this book is talking about and the way that it describes hope and grief and loss and joy I feel like they're going to shape the way that I think about 2025 as we move forward. I'm starting this year on a high note with reading because this book was just it was stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I want to wrap up this review with one more quote, if you don't mind. I found this this kind of wraps up everything I've been talking about in just a really beautiful way. So, the earth is a miracle, and you are a miracle, and life is a miracle. Keep moving into the depths of the ocean, onto the cliff, out to the star-scattered sky. To wherever you feel the terrifying whirlpool resolve into magnitude, magnificence, and the unknown. In that mystery lies all that can save you, and the world entire. It is a terror. It is a wonder. It is a vortex. It is a loss. It is a healing. It is a spiral. It is a gift. It is ours. We have all we need to meet it, over and over again, with bravery that comes from a world made so perfectly that we are always accompanied, human to animal, tree to insect, fungus to plankton, tide pool to star, blood to water. Even if you have never read a nonfiction book before, if you've stayed away from them because you think they're dry, because you think that they are... and listen, I'm not judging. These are the reasons I didn't read nonfiction for a long time either. You feel they're dry. You feel they're all information. They don't have the same story or heart or emotional impact of fiction. The Mourner's Bestiary would gladly prove you wrong. It is an impeccable work of nonfiction. It is Erin's first published work, and I absolutely hope it is not her last, because this was mind-blowingly good. I highly recommend it. 5 stars. Mourner's Bestiary. What a great way to start 2025. And whatever I read next, I don't know that anything can live up to this. It's going to be it's possible. This is my first read of 2025, and I already feel like I'm starting to make my list of best books of 2025, because this already, I feel, will have to be on it. Incredible. Okay, that wraps up my first solo book review. I would love to know what you thought, how you feel about this kind of new structure of talking a little bit more in depth about the themes and the characters in the book and the quotes. Is there anything that you wish that there was more of in these reviews? This is kind of a work in progress of diving deeper into these books, so I would love to know your thoughts. Is this something you think you might give a chance to read? I hope you do. It was excellent. I did listen to most of the book on audiobook, and it is narrated by Erin herself, which is also super powerful because there are definitely moments where you can feel her getting emotional about the words, which makes sense because it's all about her and her story. It is also all of the science parts of the book are referenced in the back if you are interested in learning more about the sciencey parts of the animals and the sea life and the oceans and the bodies of water that are discussed. You can do further research on that too, which I think is really cool. This book was wonderful. Highly recommend. I hope you get a chance to read it. And I look forward to seeing you back here for our next book review in the future. This was, as you can tell, I'm stumbling a little bit because this is the first time that we're doing this kind of book review, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back here in the future. As I said at the beginning, make sure to like and subscribe, comment. I'd love to see you again, and as always, thanks for watching, and happy reading.